All righty, good evening. This is the June 16th, 2022 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. The time is 6 o'clock sharp. Item 2 and 3 are work session items, but we'll start the meeting with a call of the roll tonight for the commission that's present. I'm Edmund House, Chairman of the Planning and Zoning Commission. Vice Chair Portman.
Present.
Commission member Sue Blankenship.
Present.
Cindy Bishop.
Here.
Freddie Guerra.
Here.
Ed Marr.
Present.
And Jim Walker.
Present.
All right, so first order of business is to review the cases. I'll turn the session over to Mary Perone Boswell. Mary, if you could introduce staff and then review the cases, please.
So we have Matt Steer, present. He's the Development Service Administrator. Mike Garza, Assistant Director of Public Works. Cole Baker, EIT Graduate Engineer. We have Rondana, I'm going to butcher your name, Sayed. Admin Tech, and Kim McGee, Planning Secretary. So this evening we do have 2 cases on the agenda. However, we are only looking at 1 case. So the plat is going to be pulled, and we'll take that next month. That's going to be withdrawn.
So do I still introduce the second item into the record, and then you say that it's been withdrawn?
Yeah. So, Blackberry Farms, you're all familiar with that. It's a case that has come and gone before Planning and Zoning Commission since about 2018, even prior to that. But about 2018, P&Z approved preliminary plat for 74 single-family lots, 9 common area lots, and then a final plat for phase 1, which was finally approved in 2020, and the ordinance was approved in 2021. Phase 2 was also approved in 2021. So originally phase 1 had about 54 single-family lots, 8 common areas, and then phase 2 had 20 residential lots in 1 common area. So tonight what we're looking at is the PD itself remains. They're asking for some additional PD conditions or changes to it. So the existing conditions would remain. These will be in addition to what's already been approved. So they're looking for some generic requests for the overall development. One of them being the single-family house dwelling size, the SF9 or phase 1. Originally, they were planning to do minimum house size of 3,000 square feet. He's come back and asked for that to be dropped down to about 2,700 square feet. Now, the SF9 that we have in the zoning ordinance allows for minimum house size of 1,600 square feet. So this is still in excess of what's required by SF9. So again, this is a minimum house size. They could build anything bigger than that as long as they meet all the other technical aspects. So there's 2 parts to this request. One is for the overall PD, so that's what we're talking about. The one change that they're asking for is to allow for an early start building permits. Typically, all the infrastructure, all the landscaping has to be in place. What they're asking for is to be able to start about 10 units prior to the landscaping being in place. So all the other infrastructure would be in place, just the landscaping kind of the last thing to go in. Usually with this type of house, the construction time is probably about close to a year. So within that time frame, they'll be working on getting the landscaping in place. The second PD condition is that the subdivision must comply with the American Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Act of 1940 and all the regulations that fall under that. So this is a federal requirement because they were out there and there's some bald eagles. So
How many?
I think there was
Official question.
A mama and a papa, and they had a couple babies. And so, our attorney talked with the Fish and Wildlife. And so basically there's a no disturbance requirement within 300 foot radius of where they were found. So there's certain requirements to allow them to, go from hatchlings to fledglings. And so he's aware of that, what he can and can't do, and the state is, or the federal agency is also aware of what's going on. So we're just saying that he needs to comply with all the federal regulations. The third kind of overall request that they're looking to do is that for people who have or want to build a pool cabana, that they be allowed to have a restroom. So this is something that over the last few years, people who are building pool cabanas have asked for that type of thing. We typically currently don't allow the restroom aspect of it, but I think in this scenario, we're okay with allowing it to have a restroom.
Is that because the lots are larger, room for those things, or?
Because the lots are larger, but also just, the thing of having a pool where you don't want people to go running inside all wet, messing up your inside, having people just be able to rinse off before they go inside.
So we're potentially allowing it here. Do we allow it, everywhere else in Coppell?
Currently, no. But for this development, instead of having to bring back every lot that comes back asking for it, we're trying to be proactive.
When was the last time we denied a restroom permit for a pool cabana?
I'm not sure when we denied one. I know that we had one like for 748 DeForest, where they built a house and they had a restroom in there. So it's probably not a very common request. Like, probably not a lot of people have room to build a cabana.
So Mary, that's my question too, is what keeps them from making this into, say, a living space? Because you're, 800 square feet?
So, but a living space would also include, a kitchen and all that other kind of stuff. So this is strictly pool cabana.
Okay.
So pool cabana is defined in the ordinance?
That's a good question. I don't know that answer.
Because we can call it something else.
Yeah, that's not defined, but this is just to allow for one restroom in an accessory structure. We want to allow a kitchen and we want to allow a bedroom. So it's just to allow for a bathroom. And yeah, so we are looking at our overall ordinance and looking to make that change. It was brought to our attention with our new building official. Actually just started last month.
So are there other small structures that don't have a kitchen that we would allow a bathroom?
So typically we don't allow bathroom in an accessory structure.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it just makes common sense to
Isn't
allow.
there a pool cabana with a restroom going in right off of Moore?
It seems like we saw one not too long ago, and that
On the
was,
south side, it's under construction right now. As you come up the hill from Beltline, that's on the left.
The only one that I'm aware of is the 748 DeForest. We took the PD when they were doing the greenhouse, the
yes,
pool.
that one.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's one.
Yeah.
But it looks like they're putting a restroom.
Okay, I'll have to look into that one.
So Cindy, the concern is that this,
I know what you're talking
it could be turned into an accessory, a dwelling? Yeah, that's the
Or,
good-
yeah, we could say we don't allow pool cabanas. Well, I'm going to build a little building and call it something else where a bathroom is allowed.
Like a pavilion.
I don't know.
Well, it's
Yeah.
not, the thing is, it's not allowed. The thing is, it's not allowed.
It's not allowed?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so all we're asking for is an accessory structure with a restroom.
But
And-
outdoor kitchens are allowed.
Right, they are allowed. They're not allowed to have a restroom though.
So would you allow the outdoor pool cabana with an outdoor kitchen and a restroom? I mean, because these are the
Yeah.
applications that will come in.
Right, because we're not saying, like the one before, the kitchen was inside a different building.
Mhm.
So it's a different thing, because I think I know what you're saying, in terms of, it wouldn't be like a secondary dwelling unit, is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah.
You can't have the three components together.
Got it. Do we have that in our rules?
Yeah, yes, we do.
Okay.
So how many of these homes does he want to have a cabana?
So it's gotta be the phase two, the larger lots, cause the other, well. I
Well,
guess
so yeah, he's asking for the entire subdivision. Sorry, Mary, I'm answering.
No, that's fine.
No, I mean, I think the issue I have is a little bit of like a carport issue where, I mean, what if somebody applied for this a month ago, was denied, is under construction, and then all of a sudden drives over there and sees cabanas with restrooms? And, you know, that just doesn't seem fair. I think if we would allow it here, we should allow it everywhere. And
But that's part of the, you know, he's asking for it upfront versus having to come back each individual person.
Yeah.
So we're trying to streamline this.
Yeah. But I guess if we don't typically approve it
Mhm.
each individual time, then they can come back each time and we would just deny it. If that's what we typically do. And so I don't see that would be necessary.
Ed, we've got a brand new building official that just pointed this out in the ordinance. The old building official would have approved it. So, this is just,
Because he read through it and realized.
because he read through the accessories and in fine print in there is, you can't have a restroom in an accessory structure. So, or maybe it says something about plumbing, can't be plumbed, so.
So, I'm still troubled by the lack of definition. So, what's to keep somebody with a relatively small lot from just putting up a really little accessory building and slapping a bathroom in there because we're gonna allow it in the whole subdivision? Are there any other restrictions that would keep a smaller lot from having such a cabana?
Maybe it has to have a pool.
Yeah, otherwise it's an outhouse.
Well, I know, but you can see where I'm going. That's true, right?
That's what we call an
That
outhouse.
was a cabana.
Down here south of the Red River, you
And
know?
legally, you
It's
have
an
to pull a
outhouse.
permit if you're gonna build your outhouse.
Right. But what's to keep you from doing it? If we say you can have pool cabanas in there, what's the definition of a pool cabana? What's the difference between a pool cabana and an outhouse?
Right, and we could get Bob to write that in the ordinance.
So, I mean, can we put that as a condition? If you want a cabana, you must have a pool.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Could we limit it to only certain house sizes too, square footage?
Or certain lot sizes, maybe?
I mean, because I'm just a little
Why
bit, some of
would
these
we-
smaller
why
homes, we
would
did
we-
something called a cabana
But,
with a restroom that's gonna look,
so is the concern, with all the setbacks and all that, I mean, there won't be any encroachment on neighboring lot. Might be crowded back there on the smaller lots, but.
And generally, in the city, why would we be opposed to having a restroom in a pool cabana? Is there a reason we would be opposed to it? That we couldn't
Yeah.
recommend changing the ordinance?
Yeah, right now, we've got that on our, we call it our ordinance matrix, all the things that we're gonna recommend. And we're gonna bring ordinance changes in clusters to you guys when we don't have that much to do, you know, so we can focus on it.
And I guess, yeah, thinking through this, if someone were to put in a pool cabana, they'd have to get a permit, just like to put it in a shed or something. Okay.
Exactly.
And that's when you could say, well, we don't like how it looks, or
You don't have a pool.
you don't have a
You don't have a pool,
or it's
yeah.
too close to the fence or something.
That pool's
Right,
too
'cause they
close to
have-
that
They
outhouse.
would have to-
yeah.
Right, so they would have to get a permit.
Okay.
Okay, I mean, could we tie it to the ordinance being changed? Because my philosophical issue with this is, if we're gonna allow it here, then we should allow it everywhere.
Right.
So, or
But
we
that's
should
not
deny it.
necessarily true. If you're gonna have 2,700 square foot houses,
Mhm.
if you've got a neighborhood with 2,000 square foot houses, why would you wanna allow accessory buildings with bathrooms for the smaller homes?
Well, I don't think you could in that case with all the setbacks, but if there's plenty of larger lots in Coppell, so if they wanted to add them right now, they couldn't. And if we allow this, ordinance doesn't get changed, and I have an acre lot, and I wanna add a pool cabana,
Then you come to the planning.
I'd come to
commission.
but I'll be denied.
Not necessarily.
Why
Well,
would
it sounds
you
like we
deny?
don't approve them, so.
No, we would recommend approval on an acre lot for a pool cabana. We would recommend approval, you guys would be a recommending body, and then that would go to city council. And we've approved several in the past on PD conditions. So this is, tonight, we're just focused on the PD. I was just giving you guys a little update, hey, we are looking at an overall citywide change as well.
Well, if you do that, I would request that allowing restrooms and pool cabanas to be part of that recommendation.
Yeah.
But you're saying that in other PDs, this has been approved in other PDs in the
Yes.
city?
Yes.
Pool cabanas
For eight
with
to fours.
restrooms.
Right,
For eight
yeah,
to fours. You
Okay.
guys did that not too long ago.
Right, but that wasn't a PD, was it?
it was,
I think it was.
It was the same individual lot, wasn't it?
right, it was a PD
But it
that,
was a PD.
yeah, that, there's a couple on Bethel that I can remember.
All right, slide 3, Mary.
Well, right, well, so this is the briefing, right?
Right.
This is not the full-fledged presentation. 'Cause we've
Kinda
got,
is,
we've got to wait until.
We're gonna be here till 11.
Yeah, we may.
We're gonna make this a night out of
I have
this.
some more questions, yeah.
So, what I just talked about was for the whole subdivision, so the phase 1 and phase 2. Now, there's a second component, and this is just for phase 2. So phase 2 is the part that's gonna be kind of, I'm gonna call it the island, because there's gonna be the bridge to get to it. Originally, it was approved for 20 lots. He's now come back wanting to do 9 lots. And so the PD conditions that we're going to talk about right now are specific to lot 5R, which is identified in the blue on the map. And so Mr. Holmes is looking to live there on this lot.
That's fine.
And so he's asking for, the following PD conditions. So as you can see, lot 5R backs up to some of the common area lots. There's like 9X and 7X. So it backs up to part of the conservation easement. And he's looking to have up to 6 accessory structures with a combined total not to exceed 8,500 square feet. So typically, the way the ordinance is written is that you cannot have accessory structures must be total less than the primary structure. Does that make sense? So the house that he's looking to build is somewhere between 4,000 to 8,000 square feet. I don't know what that final number is, but that's what he told us. And then he's asking for the following accessory structures for that lot 5R. So one of it would be, so one on the map is the main house. Number 2, identified on the map, is the accessory dwelling unit. So he's looking to have his parents live there. The house would be, accessory dwelling unit would be no greater than 1,700 square feet of living area, then 500 square foot garage, 300 square feet of patio area, and it would have a kitchen and a bathroom. So in terms of, yes, it would be like a full on house, just smaller than the typical house and an accessory to his lot. And then we've got a shop/barn not to exceed 2,600 square feet. Another barn not to exceed 2,000 square feet. An aviary not to exceed 600 square feet. Full functioning windmill with energy system for a single family residence. And then the sixth item will be the pool cabana not to exceed 800 square feet. In terms of the accessory dwelling unit, obviously, the request is A, to have an accessory dwelling unit, B, to have it where it has a full kitchen, so, and bathroom, so it is obviously a dwelling unit. What we would ask is that if it does get approved, that if the accessory dwelling unit structure were ever to be replatted into its own lot, because at some point in time, if the owner of this lot decides to sell, move, whatever, or replat, then wants to replat that lot, that we would need it to meet the minimum requirements for a lot, which means meet the minimum dwelling unit size. So currently, it would be, let's say 1,700 square feet, but the minimum lot size, I think, is about 2,400 for the phase 2. So they would have to increase or add on to the house to meet that minimum size. They would have to meet all the other requirements in terms of your setbacks, street access, etc. And so we've talked about that with him.
So if he sold, and he sold it all together, this would be one lot, they'd have to increase number 2 to 2,400, and then I guess the accessory dwelling is combined, I guess they'd get wiped out or whatever, and
Right, so at some point in time, if he was looking to move and he either would tear down everything, or if he wanted to keep everything there except for number 2 and separate that off, we'd have to look at, like I said, for number 2, in order for him to separate that, he needs to meet all the requirements. He couldn't just sell it off as it stood.
But he could sell off the whole parcel
Right.
as an
and if you wanted to break it into 3, there's plenty of room to do that.
Maybe 3.
In other words,
put a third house on.
yeah, take all the accessory dwelling units, create a lot out of that.
Right, he could probably put, because right now that's 6 lots.
Yeah.
So he could go back to, anywhere from 1 up to 6.
Now, are the Eagles living around 4, 5, 6?
They're right in front of 2.
Okay, so it's gonna be very hard to develop 2.
Well, there's certain requirements or stipulations about the Eagles in terms of, do they come back, do they not come back? So that's definitely something that we have to look at. It's a little too early to talk about that one. But that's kind of why he's pushed the cul-de-sac back and replatted some of that stuff, is to keep that tree where it is.
So maybe no concerns with the windmill and the eagles? I know it's gonna be small, but
That's, we've talked to him, we've put kind of, the next kind of stuff is a maximum height limitation to certain things. With an accessory structure, I think the maximum height is, I think it's 10 or 12 feet, I think it's 12 feet. So he's asking obviously to go up higher because it's gonna be a barn, it's not 12 feet, wouldn't work.
So how does that work when he sells it? I assume, like for number 2, the title company would do a title search and would see this reported on the property. But it's gonna be probably with a stack of other documents, and similar to sort of the carport, what if they don't catch it? And in all likelihood, the carport, it would tell us, because carports aren't allowed, that would tell us that there's a high likelihood they won't catch it. And so the structure would remain as is, even after the resale.
Are you talking about the house?
Yeah, the number 2 lot.
I think there's different ways we could handle it. One would be to put a note maybe even on the plat. We could talk to the city attorney about, maybe there's deed restrictions that we can put on it. Or that he could volunteer to put on it. Can't put deed restrictions on it. But, yeah, it'll definitely be, I think it's doable. It's just something that'll be definitely different.
So if it's 1,700 square feet, the minimum for SF9 is 1,600.
This is part is SF7.
Oh, SF7. And what's the minimum for SF7?
So SF7, so in the way it's on here, it's 2,400 square feet. But SF7 typically is $1,200.
Okay.
So with the different accessory units, especially with the barns and everything, is looking to have a maximum height of 25 feet to the peak. So this will apply to all of the accessory units. The other PD condition is to allow for a restroom and/or sink in the accessory units. So we're looking at the 2 barns and the cabana to have some kind of restroom and/or sink. The next PD condition that he's looking at is he's looking to have some animals on the site. So any horse, cattle, sheep, goat, or other livestock to be allowed within 100 feet of any residence or occupied building on lot 5R block D. So typically the ordinances, you can't have livestock within 100 feet of property zone residential. This is to allow it on that lot to be within 100 feet of the houses on his lot. It would still have to abide by the distance for adjacent properties that's zoned residential. Does that make sense?
Oh, okay.
So it's on my lot, I can have it within 100 foot of my house. Does that make sense?
But you can't have it within 100 feet of your next door neighbor's house.
Correct.
Is it 100 feet of the property line or the house for the structure?
Residence.
Yeah, it says any residence or occupied building.
So what happens if Building 2 someday gets its own plat and is sold as a separate house?
Right, then they'd have to pull back and meet the requirements.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
So just quick question, so there's no concern from going from 20 to 9 homes, and then also that early start is going to apply to phase 2, not phase 1, right? Or
The 20 to 9 is for phase 2. The early start is it's going to be phase 1 because phase 2 is going to happen later because they have to build a bridge and everything else. But it's 10, it doesn't say phase 1 or 2, which 10 units, it just says 10 homes.
Okay,
But you can't get a CO until everything's done.
okay.
And then the second part, or the last PD condition that they're looking at, is for any enclosure, pen, corral, or other restrictive area for livestock to be located within 10 feet of residentially zoned property or any property used for residential purposes on lot 5R Block D. So obviously, we're still talking about lot 5R Block D. So for his lot to have the enclosures or whatever within that distance. Any other lot in that neighborhood, they have to comply with the requirements.
And the city attorney was okay with that language, because I didn't read it that way when I first read it. Just, I read it as within 10 feet of any residentially zoned property, period. Or any property used for residential purposes on lot 5R.
No, there's no period, and
I know,
And,
but,
and all of it is, we
Okay.
state it is just for lot 5R.
okay.
So everything that we're talking about is specifically to lot 5R.
Okay.
I have a question for the applicant on the
We're
horse
not
goat.
moving.
Yeah.
What's that?
We're still in.
No, we're in a recession. No, I will have a question
Okay.
for the, on, or other livestock. What is it, what that means?
Chickens.
Just want to make sure I understand, that's all.
Yeah, I think that's the way it's written in the ordinance.
Okay.
So we just copied that.
Yeah. And in the ordinance, it expressly prohibits chicken and poultry, or
Swine.
swine and, yeah.
So we got plenty of
So
swine
there's
running around.
there's a rooster at the corner of, no rooster?
Yeah, they're not allowed.
Every morning.
What kind of birds are allowed in the aviary? Can chickens be in there?
You'll have to ask the applicant, but not by ordinance.
Not by ordinance.
No.
Yeah.
So he can
So-
build the aviary, but he can't have birds in it?
Can't have chickens.
Yeah, chickens. It's
Okay.
chickens.
Poultry.
Yeah.
So, to make sure I understand, so the 100 feet of any residence, so you're in the center of someone's backyard, is it to your neighbor's property line, to the edge of their house, to the center of their house,
It's the edge of the house.
to the edge of the house?
Right, like you're sticking something on that house or measuring it.
As the crow
But it says
flies.
the enclosure reads though the property, but the livestock reads building.
Right.
Yeah, occupied building.
So the animals can't be within 100 feet of a building, but the enclosure can, but it can't be within 10 feet of that property.
Yes.
How can the enclosure be closer than the animal? Right?
Yeah.
Is the animal not gonna use the enclosure?
Free range, who knows? I don't know.
So-
Yeah,
So you
because the
could
animal, yeah, how do you put, yeah, you're right, how do you put the fence here, but the animal stay right there, you can't go within 100 feet, but the fence can.
Right. I mean, there are, I think, plenty of lots where you could put a horse in your backyard or a goat and be within 100 feet of the edge of your neighbor's house. That's certainly possible. So,
There aren't many horses left in Coppell.
Cottonwood, right? Is that the only-
We had some on Cottonwood.
Let's see.
Any other questions of, I'm sorry, Mary, are you getting close here?
Yeah, I'm
You
done.
could slide forward.
Yeah.
No, I think Cindy's right about the way that's written.
Thank you. I was just gonna ask you if you had the same concern I did. It's
Because when you
unclear.
use the word "or," it's
Yeah,
within
it's
10
not
feet of
and.
any residentially zoned property or any property used for residential purposes on that lot.
yeah,
Mhm.
right.
I'm not really sure why you would have that distinction, or why it wouldn't just read of any property used for residential purposes on lot 5R Block D, and just take out the any residentially zoned property.
I was just copying the confinement restrictions as currently written. I'm trying to make it for
Yeah,
lot
well,
5R.
Well, so you have two things. You could have a residence on a commercial property. So it's being used as a residence. And then you could have a property that's zoned for residential. So that's why it's zoned or used.
Okay, but on this
Yeah.
particular property, since this is a PD, there's not going to be anything commercially zoned anywhere near or around it, right? I mean, because it's a PD and it's residential around it, or it's,
Absolutely,
or
yeah.
it's the river on the other side.
Yeah,
So-
like I said, I was just using the
Right.
existing language and
I think it would be more clear if it's parallel, if it mirrors the language in the previous bullet. Within 10 feet of any residence or occupied building on lot 5R, block D.
I would concur.
you can amend that.
Well, but that's different though, because that's the distance to the actual building.
Yeah, you gotta put it to
The
the
last one is the
property.
distance to the actual property line.
Right.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, those really need to be
I see.
combined.
It's a good thing we've got some attorneys on the commission.
I mean, you say that today.
Never again.
That could be used very differently tomorrow.
So on the windmill, mill, what's the height of that? Will it have sightlines from other properties? Have we ever approved those? What's the restriction around property lines? Are there concerns with the habitat around there, birds getting chopped up? So the easements,
Right,
so I just have
yeah.
one or two questions about that.
Okay, well, so years ago, we brought forward small-scale wind energy. Do you remember that? We brought that forward to city council. And they didn't like the idea. So they said, okay, we're going to prohibit wind energy in our ordinance, because we don't want to see wind turbines. The flicker effect, they had a bunch of reasons.
Yeah.
And so I think what Terry's proposing here is a decorative sort of windmill that isn't allowed technically by our ordinance, but we'll let him talk through it during his presentation or during his question and answer. But we told him to put it in there as a condition because we specifically do not allow for wind turbines or wind energy. So if he did want to hook it up to a motor, then technically it wouldn't be allowed. But I don't think he's got a wind turbine in mind. But we'll let him answer that.
Well, because it has an energy system for a single family.
Right.
home, So,
Yeah, and that might have been just added here just recently or something.
yeah, and so it's number 6, I think, right? So it's
Right.
right on the
Yeah.
property line. So even though the adjacent property is owned by the same owner,
Well, it's all one property.
all one lot.
Everything in red is one property. What you're looking at is there's an easement or something right there.
okay.
So everything outlined in red is a lot 5R, or proposed lot 5R.
And what's the distance from the boundary to the 6 box?
At 20 feet.
It looks like it falls outside of the setback.
That's
rear yard
the setback line?
This distance right here,
Mhm.
what is that called?
Can you pull the plat back up? Is it showing there with this? No, setback's not around
Is that 25 feet?
This is 20 feet,
Yeah,
so it's roughly around 25 feet.
okay. So so my question on there is, so if somebody else wanted to do that in Coppell, as long as it's 25 feet from, 25 feet from the property line, they have to come in for approval to do that, but would likely approve it.
We'd have to, everything's on a case-by-case basis.
Right,
So
yeah, this
it's
is,
not an automatic.
this is so unique, it's back in the woods. I don't think we'd allow a wind turbine in the middle of a neighborhood, but in this unique case, I think we're in support of it.
Because the lot is right here, and it backs up to basically a lake. So there's nothing,
Right. Yeah, no, I get that. I think with the sort of the lack of clarity in terms of the height, what it will look like, do the surrounding house. I would imagine if it's even 25 feet, the surrounding neighborhoods would see it, potentially get glare from it, and I don't, you know, have they been notified that that would be possible and so forth?
What he was talking about was the wind turbine down in Old Town. Or not wind turbine, the windmill in Old Town at Coppell and Bethel. It's Heritage Park. There's one that was donated by J.C. Thweet, yeah.
Square wood frame.
Yes, it's really old, and
Yeah.
I think that's what he's looking for is something like that. It's not gonna be like a wind
Not Palm
turbine.
Springs.
No.
No, I mean, I get that, and I don't know that I have an issue with that, but if it's powering a single-family residence, that in Old Town would not power a single-family residence, so, and that in Old Town probably wouldn't power a couple cell phones,
Right.
because it's not moving
Yeah,
really that
absolutely.
much. So,
Yeah, I think.
that's fine,
I think definitely
if we
get some
specifically say
clarification.
that it's decorative, below a certain height, and whatever power you get from it, but, I think that could be a really big issue for the surrounding neighbors, because you'll see it, if it's 25 feet in the air, you'll see it, for sure.
Okay. Mary, anything else? 6:42?
Yeah, so we can send out notices. I gave you guys a copy of the replies that we did get back for you to look at. And then all the conditions. And then item 7, Terry is withdrawing that item. We're going to take it back next month, the plat. Right? Yeah. Okay. So with that, that's all I have.
All righty, thank you. You want to cover the council items now, or you wait till a regular session?
Yeah, I'll do that right now. Could we just take a second?
Sure.
Is that okay? So we did have council 2 nights ago on Tuesday. We did take forward the ordinances for the hot wire fence at Stratford and the carports for Short Park. Those were both approved, the ordinances. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I briefed the council on the pylon signs, the changeable letters, and the billboards. And so I will bring forward a regular session item next month to city council.
You did a very good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
good.
great. I second that.
Okay, thank you, Mary. So the time's 6:43, 5-minute break before we start?
Your
Sure.
phone. Turn your phone.
Sorry,
Mhm.
just to make sure there's no signal. Okay, so the time is 6:43. We'll adjourn the work session and we'll reconvene right at 6:50 for a regular session.
We're convening here.
We're gonna be convening
So
here.
there's no reason
Yes,
to
we
move
are.
my stuff.
No, but if you wanted a quick break or anything.
Okay.
Cindy.
Cynthia and
Guess we're not ready.
Jim, okay.
No problem.
I still beat Jim.
Hand these out in a minute anyway.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
These are the 6 questions on leadership. Into that.
Yeah, so we'll let Matt talk about that when we get to the minutes.
Jim's holding us up. We could start.
I think you can start.
I think we're going to do that. You can join in. All right. Okay, so the time is 6:52 and we're reconvening into regular session. All the members of the commission, except for Jim Walker, is present. Jim will be walking in probably in a minute. Item 4 on the agenda is a citizen's appearance. If there's any citizen who wishes to speak on any item other than the items on the agenda. I see some folks in the audience. Are you all here to speak on the item on the agenda or, oh, just observing? Okay, good. Thank you for coming out. Okay, Mary, have you received any other comments regarding the cases tonight?
Yes, sir. And I've handed out some sheets to each of the board members regarding comments for item 6.
Okay. Alrighty, so our item 5 on the agenda is approval of our meeting minutes from our May 19th meeting. And I understand that there's an addendum to the meeting minutes that includes the questions that I just handed out. These were our kind of the comments we had regarding the 6 steps of leadership. I think our assignment from Matt is that we need to review these to create like a summary of these items.
Right, yeah, just review them, be ready to speak about them next month, and we can consolidate the bullet points into one cohesive statement for each of the answers. Thank you.
Are there any comments or discussion on the meeting minutes? Is there a motion on the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion for the approval of the May 19th, 2022 Planning and Zoning Commission.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Guerra. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Commissioner Bishop. Cam, would you call the roll, please?
Please respond by saying aye or aye as I call your name. Chairman House.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Portman.
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra.
Aye.
Commissioner Bishop.
Aye.
Commissioner Blankenship.
Abstain, I wasn't here.
Commissioner Mauer.
Aye.
All approved, none opposed, motion carries.
Okay, very good. Item 6 on the agenda is a public hearing. This is PD-259R-SF-7/SF9, that being the Blackberry Farm zoning change. To consider approval of Blackberry Farm zoning change request from Plan Development 259, Single Family 7 and Single Family 9 to Plan Development 259, Revised Single Family 7, Single Family 9, to amend the PD conditions for the overall development and within Phase 2, reducing the number of residential lots from 20 to 9, shortening the cul-de-sac on Windmill Drive, and allowing Lot 5R Block D to have accessory dwelling units and additional accessory structure on 54.855 acres of land located on the northeast quadrant of Sandy Lake Road and MacArthur Boulevard at the request of Terry Holmes of HBBL Inc. and being represented by Westwood Professional Services. We have a staff presentation by Mary Brun Boswell. Before we get into it, I'm going to have to leave here momentarily. I'll turn the commission over to Vice Chair Portman in just a minute or so. All right, okay, Mary.
Good evening, Chairman, Commissioners. This first item is Blackberry Farms. Just some brief history. We've been looking at this project since about earlier than 2018, but in 2018 the P&Z Commission approved a preliminary plat for 74 single-family lots and 9 common area lots, and a final plat for Phase 1 for 54 lots, 8 common areas, and Phase 2 was 20 lots with 1 common area. So the plats, the ordinance, everything, we finally got everything approved back in March of 2021. So what we're looking at this evening is essentially the PD will remain the same. They're asking for some additional PD conditions. So for the overall site, which is outlined in red, they're asking for Originally, the minimum house size for phase one was to be 3,000 square feet. They're asking for a change for the minimum house size for phase one to be 2,700 square feet. So this is still a two-phase request. Phase one includes 54 lots, while phase two will now have 9 lots. So the following conditions being requested, I said, for the overall amended PD, the house size for phase one, which is SF9, to go from 3,000 to 2,700 square feet. The minimum house size for the typical SF9 is 1,600 square feet. So this is still significantly larger than what is allowed through the SF9 zoning. As stated, this is only a minimum size and would allow for larger homes. So staff is in support of this request. A couple other PD conditions that are for the overall development that they're requesting is to early start building permits for up to 10 homes that may be issued after the infrastructure acceptance by the city and in advance of landscape acceptance by the city. So what this means is they're asking to start a maximum of 10 homes. So this would happen after the city has accepted all the infrastructure, but before the landscaping is necessarily all in place. So typical for this type of house probably takes up to about a year to build. And so staff is okay with them starting up to 10 houses, but they will not be allowed to get a CO until all the landscaping is in place. Another condition that they're requesting, so this subdivision must comply with American Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Act of 1940 and regulations promulgated thereunder. So this is a federal requirement and serves to protect the habitat of birds found nesting in a portion of phase two. Let's see here. And the last overall condition that we're talking about is for pool cabanas. So anyone who builds a pool cabana would be allowed to have a restroom in that pool cabana. So currently this is not allowed. However, it's been a common request and staff would be in support of this request. So in addition to the overall conditions that we just talked about, their following conditions are being requested specifically for Lot 5R Block D, which is located on 1.908 acres in Phase 2 at the end of the cul-de-sac Windmill Drive. So it's identified on your screen in. So Lot 5R backs up to a common area, which is part of the conservation easement. The developer is planning to reside here and is requesting to have up to 6 accessory structures, including a detached accessory dwelling unit on this lot. So the combination of accessory units is not to exceed 8,500 square feet. So typically the accessory structures must be less than the primary structure. In this case, there's a variety of structures that they're requesting. The main structure is planned to be anywhere from 4,000 to 8,000 square feet. It hasn't been determined exactly, but they're requesting to have up to 8,500 square feet of accessory structures. So that I mentioned, outlined in red on the screen is Lot 5R. The main house, which is identified by the number 1, is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 8,000 square feet. Number 2, these are from 2 to 7 are the accessory structures. So they're just numbered how they show up on the map there. So the first one will be the 1 accessory dwelling unit, which in our discussions with Mr. Holmes would be a dwelling unit for his parents. So this would be a smaller house, accessory structure with a kitchen and a bathroom, not to exceed 1,700 square feet of living area, 500 square feet of garage, and 300 square feet of patio area. The next 5 buildings would be also accessory structures. So number 3 is a shop/barn, which would be less than 2,600 square feet. Another barn less than 2,000 square feet. Number 5 is an aviary, less than 600 square feet. Number 6 is a functioning windmill with an energy system for a single-family residence. And number 7, a pool cabana less than 800 square feet. So one thing that I did want to touch on is the accessory dwelling unit number 2. And that if it were to ever be replatted into its own lot, it would need to meet the minimum requirements for a lot and for meeting the dwelling unit size, setbacks, etc. So as it is currently planned at 1,700 square feet, it would not meet the minimum requirements for the other houses in this subdivision. So it would have to be bumped up, so they would have to put on an addition before it could be replatted, separate from this current lot configuration. So when we're talking about the accessory buildings, typical accessory building is around 12 feet in height maximum. So these type of structures, he's requesting building height to be 25 feet, and we're saying that is to the peak of the roof. One of the other key conditions with this that they are requesting is to have, for each accessory structure, may be allowed to have a restroom and or sink. The next one would be, he would like to have animals on his property. So any horse, cattle, sheep, or goat, or any other livestock may be allowed within 100 feet of any residence or occupied building on Lot 5R Block D. So when we're talking about the distance requirements, that's for, because I think when we did some measuring, I think one of the barns is probably like a couple feet short of the 100 feet. But they would have to meet all the distance requirements on neighboring residential properties. And that also is inclusive of the last condition with any enclosure, pen, corral, or other restrictive area for livestock may be located within 10 feet of any residentially zoned property, or property used for residential purposes on Lot 5R Block D. So we did send out letters within 46 within property owners within 200 feet, an additional 94 within 800 feet. We did receive some phone calls and emails from residents along Hollywood Drive wanting more information. I did provide you with some of the email correspondence that I did have with people that did respond. Just to go into a couple that did write me back. I did receive 2 emails not in favor of the request for the items listed for Lot 5R. So Ms. Williams of Hollywood Drive is opposed to allowing the accessory dwelling unit and other structures, essentially stating that unless all Coppell is allowed to have this, the developer does not need these to sell his product. I'm just quoting here, this is a personal request submitted as a business need. The accessory dwelling unit end up being rented out on short-term sites like VRBO. If it's not part of the primary residence, it should not be allowed. And then another resident, Ms. Neary, was not necessarily in favor of the idea. So staff is recommending approval of PD 259 R2 SF9 SF7 for outdoor farm, subject to the following conditions. So one, to allow a reduction in the minimum house size in phase 1 to be 2,700 square feet. 2, to allow the early start building permits for up to 10 homes. These may be issued after infrastructure acceptance by the city in advance of landscape acceptance by the city. However, no certificates of occupancy will be allowed prior to landscaping being accepted. 3, the subdivision must comply with the American Bald Eagle and Golden Eagle Act of 1940 and regulations promulgated thereunder. 4, that pool cabanas shall be allowed to have a restroom. 5, the following conditions are specific to Lot 5R Block D. A, that up to 6 accessory structures with a combined size not to exceed 8,500 square feet. B, that the accessory structures include a detached accessory dwelling unit with a secondary kitchen and bathroom not to exceed 700 square feet, 500 square foot garage, 300 square feet patio area, 1 shop barn not to exceed 2,600 square feet, 1 barn not to exceed 2,000 square feet, an aviary not to exceed 600 square feet, 1 functioning windmill with energy system for a single-family residence, 1 pool cabana not to exceed 800 square feet. The following, continued. Maximum accessory building height of 25 feet to the peak. Accessory structure may be allowed to have a restroom and or sink. And then any horse, cattle, sheep, or goat or other livestock may be allowed within 100 feet of any residence or occupied building on Lot 5R Block D. F, any enclosure, pen, corral, or other restricted area for livestock may be located within 10 feet of any residentially zoned property. The property used for residential purposes on Lot 5D. I think the one item which I spoke to, but I guess I forgot to write on here, is the if that lot, accessory dwelling unit on Lot 5R was to be subdivided, that it would need to come into compliance with all the regulations for residents. That is the end of my presentation. I believe the applicant is here as well and available to answer questions.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Any questions of Mary by commissioners? Go ahead, Sue.
So if they sold off that accessory building and had to replat it, then it wouldn't comply with the PD for the 9 lots in the cul-de-sac? Would they have to come back and do a PD amendment?
I mean, the 9 lots in the cul-de-sac.
Well, we're modifying the PD to only allow 9 lots in the cul-de-sac.
So we would probably have to amend it to allow for,
Okay, so they'd have to subdivide it and amend the PD.
yeah, but I'll verify that, just to make sure.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mary?
Yeah, a couple questions. On the bird of the American Bald Eagle Act of 1940, so it shows on the site plan where the eagle's nest is. I think you had mentioned in pre-session that had to be 300 feet away. Is that 300 feet away from a structure?
No, so the way it's worded is that they can't do any work within 300 feet while the eagles are there. So they can't disturb that area within 300 feet while the eagles are there.
So when they fly off, we can start hammering,
Yeah.
and then when they come back, you stop work?
So is
That's my understanding.
the law to prevent them from getting hurt, or is it prevent them from having to move?
I think it's both.
Because if you're doing work and the nest is there, and you have a jackhammer or what have you, they're probably not gonna come back. And so I just wanna, like, we're saying that they have to comply.
Right.
I just wanna make sure we understand, because we're basically saying, based on where the nest is, it's probably gonna comply. It doesn't sound like it will.
So, our city attorney has talked with the Game and Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife, whatever federal entity that is, And Mr. Holmes has also talked to them, and there's a regulation where it says it's a non-disturbance. Terry knows a little bit more about it than me. It's a non-disturbance thing, so while the eagles are there, they can't do any work. So there's gonna be a point in time where they leave, and then we'll have to see if they come back.
I mean, I think as long as the city attorney and the appropriate authorities have looked through the regulations and they're comfortable with it, then that seems fine. I just because it is fairly vague here that.
Well, that was from our attorney to write it that way. Not to be vague, but that
Yeah.
they have to comply with federal regulations.
Yeah.
And so the federal, entity is aware of the situation and, that he will have to comply with it because there's very stiff penalties if you don't.
Sure. And then in terms of the height of the accessory building, 25 feet, have we approved that in the past with other PDs?
Trying to think. I know we've done,
The DeForest PD, right, that had
Yeah.
accessory structures.
higher than that,
Very
yeah.
Okay.
And the commercial buildings that are higher than, but under 75, I think.
So like the residential, like a house in that district can be up to 35 feet.
Right. Okay. And then in terms of the animals, the horse, cattle, and sheep or goat,
Mhm.
so if they, I guess a couple questions. One, what does the ordinance say about the number allowed? Can you have 100 horses,
No.
cattle, or is it
It's very,
restricted?
yeah, it's very specific as to how many you can have on. Let's see. Okay, so it talks about no more than 3 large animals, specifically horses, cattle, and sheep, can be maintained per acre of lot area. Swine and poultry are expressly prohibited. And then when you get to the livestock section, it talks about, it shall be unlawful for any person to keep a cow, horse, or on any premises, the overall area which is less than 1/3 of an acre for each cow or horse kept, or keep more of said animals than can be cared for under sanitary conditions. The total number of cows or horses permitted shall not exceed 1 adult per 1/3 acre for the first acre, and 2 adults per acre for each additional acre over 2 acres of a single tract of land. So there are stipulations, regulations in place.
Okay, and this modification, they would have to,
So it doesn't modify the number that they can have, it just
Right.
says, it's specifically talking about where they are allowed in relation to the residents.
okay. And so with the 100-foot rule, can the animals walk to the edge of the property line? And if they do, would they be, it looks like on the site plan, they'd probably violate the 100-foot rule.
So I would think that they would have to have a fence, you can't have a fence in the front yard, so there's other requirements that kind of take care of that. It's not like
Okay,
they'd
but
be
is
walking on the
that
street.
proposed? Because it doesn't look like that's proposed.
Right, so this is a schematic, it's not like the final drawing of exactly what the house is gonna look like, exactly what. I'm sure this is gonna kind of be shimmied around a little bit once we get into the finer details.
No, I get that. I'm just saying the way this is written, if we approve it, it doesn't specify that there needs to be a enclosure. It says any enclosure or restrictive area has to be located, it doesn't say you have to have an enclosure. So you could have the animals housed in an area that doesn't have an enclosure. Then any concern with, so the number sort of answers the question, but any concern with like smells or like wafting to other houses?
I'm sure that is a concern. But I think the location of where he's looking to have it is probably pretty far away from the other residences.
Okay.
And I think there's like other criteria, in the livestock ordinances that talks about,
Mhm.
having to get rid of the waste and et cetera.
Sure. And then, so chickens are strictly prohibited for now, anywhere, but they were allowed at some point. Because I remember
There's a rooster egg.
when I first moved here, they sold them at eggs. And so I think that was,
Doesn't mean they were allowed.
Yeah.
true. Okay, so that's been a long-standing ordinance for poultry.
Because we did look at it a couple of years ago, I think Matt took something forward and
Yeah.
then denied it again.
Yeah, I brought forward just kind of the idea of backyard chickens, and council didn't want us to bring forward any sort of ordinance amendments.
Okay. And then the last question is on the windmill that we talked about in the pre-session, of getting an idea of how large the structure and just putting some guardrails around that.
I think I'll let Mr. Holmes talk about
Okay.
that.
Sounds good.
Because I really have no other information about it.
Sounds good.
Okay, any other questions for Mary?
I just had a couple. So when it says any horse, cattle, sheep, or goat, or any other livestock may be allowed within 100 feet of any residence. So am I correct that that means that you can't have, they can't get any closer than 100 feet? Right? They can be allowed within 100 feet, but they can't get within 90 feet or 80 feet or 50 feet. Is that, you think that's a good reading of that?
Well, they're asking for an exception to that.
So
Right.
it could be 10 feet.
So I think
Wait, what do you mean? I thought that was the exception, the condition that we're looking at.
well, it talks about any residence, but we're saying within their own lot. they
Fair
can be
enough,
closer.
fair enough. Setting that issue aside. But just on the distance itself, so it's any horse, cattle, sheep, or goat, or any other livestock may be allowed within 100 feet. That means that they can't get any closer than 100 feet, right? They can get up to 100 feet.
No, it's not.
They are allowed within that 100 foot. It says that they
Okay.
may be within that. 100 foot.
Okay, thank you. All right, okay.
But normally it's the ordinance is no
Is not-
no
is
closer
100
than
foot.
100
Right.
foot.
So the animals can be within 100 feet of the residence, and that makes sense then that their enclosure can be within 10 feet of the residence. Because their animals are still within 100 feet, the way that, right?
And it's gonna be their own residence.
Right, no, I get that, I was just confused, because if the animals couldn't get any closer than 100 feet, but their pen is within 10 feet, where they're gonna be living, then it just seemed like
And they would be closer.
they would be closer than, but I see how you're reading it, okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mary. Applicant is present, Mr. Harry, you wish to tell the commission what your proposal is?
Yes, you want me to just go here?
Sure.
Up there?
To the mic.
Right there.
Okay. Hello, Commission, my name is Terry Holmes,
If you want to
and
bring this
thanks
thing
for
right
this. I know this has been going on for a long time, so some of you, like Mr. Haas, has seen this, probably no wonder why he left. He's like, I'm not going to see this again. But The first time we brought it to council was in '99. It's issues with single lake road and stuff like that. But so much has changed since then, and so this would have not been here had it not been for the eagles. So the eagles meant that, so yes, we had 2 bald eagles that we found in October 7th, and they've since had 2 babies, and so those babies are doing well and flying. And I thought the eagles would have, no one really knows what eagles do around here, is what I kind of find out when I work with the Fish and Wildlife. They're like, they could be, the questions are they migratory or not? And sometimes they can't be, sometimes they can't. Well, I saw the eagles there yesterday, so they are dealing with 100-degree weather just fine. And but what they don't do is they don't stay in the nest. They are only in the nest from October, in the nesting period, which is October to basically May. And after the fledgling, after the babies fledge, they leave the nest, and then we are actually, with the way the rules are, we can actually remove the nest and the tree if we want to. We've chosen not to, but so what it's always called is a taken. So if you read all the, more than I ever thought I'd want to know or need to know about eagles, but it's called a taken. And so, and a taking is really bad. So there's all kinds of takings that are illegal. And so but disturbing one, doing anything crazy to one is a taking. But once they leave the nest, then you can actually, once the nest is abandoned, is the key word, then you can basically remove it. And so we have already applied for a nest disturbance permit, which what that allows is, because what people have thought about this a long time ago, decided that if this rule wasn't in place, then we would probably take down the nest, because we would be at too much risk of having a taking and being a federal offense. So what the rules allow is for us to basically negotiate with a group out in Albuquerque what the nest disturbance permit allows. And so it will allow what we've submitted, and it's not finalized yet, but it will basically allow us to work within the 300-foot radius, and so the idea being we can work there. Now, we won't do it like before 8 o'clock or after 6, so there's limitations to where if the eagles decide to come back, then they have a peaceful time. And we'll do a dark sky concept where the street lights are aiming down, they're not broadcasting out like most. So things like this to try to create the habitat for them to come back into, all the time. So the nest right now is about half gone though. It used to be about 6 to 7 feet in diameter. Now it's about half of that, because with the winds, with the other trees that were there, I did not know about it until all the trees were down. And then it's like, my guys told me, hey, there's eagles. So now it doesn't have the protection of the other trees, so that's what gives it, is where it's at risk at blowing down. So they will hopefully, I thought they had already left the area because I had not seen them in about 2 months. I've not been looking for them but then I saw them yesterday. It was really cool. And so that's why we're here, is really because of the eagles. And then with that, I moved the street, as you know, 50 feet, maybe street shorter. And then I would have probably come back later on to ask for some of these other requests, because it was my girls, which are adult girls and families, and my wife's kind of idea is to have this kind of family farm, and maybe a couple of my grandkids and family would live on the same street. So that's the goal. And so, but I would have come back, and so my parents are 88 and 86 and still in good health, thank God. And my dad's he has a wood shop. They live in Euless now. So my goal is to have them, bring them closer and to take care of them. And so that's the small house. They live in a 2,700 square foot house. He's got like a 3-car garage shop with a 2-story, for other wood and stuff. But he loves woodworking. So that's kind of his so a lot of these buildings, while we're saying that they're gonna be maybe this size and this size, the reality is they won't all be the maximum size. I don't have any desire to do that, but it's hard to design them and guess at them when you really haven't designed them out. So that's, and our house will not be 8,000 feet. Kids are gone, ours is 4,500 now, it won't not be that big. So, and the reason for asking for the smaller square footage, 3,000, 2,700, is what we found, and even in Red Hawk, one of our smallest homes there is one of our coolest homes, in my opinion, but it's 2,700 square feet, you know, and it's an empty nester house, but it's a high end. It's got probably the highest, like it's got a zinc roof from Germany, and it's really well built. I mean, it's a great house, and that's what made me think, like, wow, why couldn't we build that same house there? It would be so, you know, with the empty nester, and the aging population, I think that's why I thought the 2,700 is just a little less, but it's probably, I would hate not to be able to build that house over there. As far as the livestock, one of the questions was, well, what other livestock? The only thing we would want is a miniature llama. If you haven't ever seen one, they're really cool. So it's like a German Shepherd, but with long legs. So it would be, I think I would probably try to get one of those. The windmill, I think if we could say, like, I'm thinking one like is in Old Town. It just so happened that we named that street Windmill, but that was not thought about even us living there when those street names were made. So it happened to work out, I think, nice, and we would probably just have it's more of an ornamental woodmill, probably. But I think that if I had to guess, maybe 30 feet. But if I had to guess, the aviary, what the goal there is I would love to be licensed to be able to get birds of prey and be able to restore them back. We've had some injured birds in our construction, and it's really very challenging to find a place to take them. They basically say take them back to the tree that you found them and let them go, and you know, it's really hard to do when you have a little owl that's you'd like to keep, or you'd like for them not to make it through the night anyways. You know? So I'm not sure you did, but and just so it's kind of hard to know how that look is, but this is not visible from any other house. There's if you look on an aerial or whatever, the way it, like any of the people from Hollywood, like you can't see it, the way the river Denton Creek comes and the tall trees that are around it, it is impossible to see from any other house at all. And yeah. I think that's all I have, if there's any questions.
Do you intend to disclose your usage and design to the people who buy houses in your Blackwell Farm area?
Absolutely, yeah. This will not be a secret by any means. I actually would hope to build one of the first homes. I heard that in pre-session. I would hope that we can build here. I would like to get ours built just so I can help build the other homes so much easier, kind of like Red Hawk. I live so close to Red Hawk, and it makes life really simple and makes quality better. And I would like to get my parents over here as quick. They're 88, so time is of the essence.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
I do, sorry.
Go ahead.
I do have one question. I guess you talked about the reduction of the square footage of the homes, but can you kind of explain the reasoning of going from 20 lots to 9 lots?
Yep, because those were actually had the narrower, I think 5-foot side yard setbacks is what it was zoned with the, SF7. But I just thought in reality that's not what we're going to build. And so I had asked back when the Eagles, and we had a meeting with Bob and Mary, he said, hey, just put everything in and get it the way you really think it's gonna be, so we don't gotta bring it back to you guys again. And in the reality, those would not be, they would not be that narrow of a lot. I foresee even in phase one, taking, just like we did Red Hawk, taking 3 lots and making them 2, or maybe taking 2 lots and making them 1. I believe that's gonna happen, and so I thought just do it now, because those lots were like 65 feet wide, and it's just, I would bet on those just being bigger homes, and, yeah.
Thank you.
Jim?
On the windmill, so, you know, the kind of windmill that's out in front of the Kirkland houses, they traditionally used to pump water into a tank, right?
Yeah.
But you're wanting to run residential power through this one, is that right?
Hey, I mean, that will likely never happen, and if you wanted to strike it, that's probably okay. I want it to look, the looks is more important than the effectiveness of it.
You're wanting something like in front of the Kirkland house
Yeah.
for the ornamental or the aesthetic value
Yeah.
of a family
With
farm?
a water tower, a water tank up there.
Okay, because, I mean, do you have any plans for like, do you know, like, would it be a 2,000 watt?
You know, I know so little about that, I know almost nothing about that. But, so, I thought when it wasn't, when Bob said, hey, you can't have this, I thought, well, okay, maybe I would ask for it now, so I didn't have to come back. But in reality, with all the trees that are on Denton Creek, and there are a lot of, they're tall trees, a lot of the cottonwoods and stuff, I just can't believe it's gonna get the wind to even hardly turn. I mean, like you said, it may be
Yeah.
a cell phone.
Do you know what the blade material will be? Will the blade
I
be
think
made?
it's like what Mr. Thweet had, it's just,
Just wood?
well, I'm guessing those are metal, but I could be wrong.
Could be metal, yeah,
I'm
tin.
thinking it's just a tin,
Mhm.
old tin one that rusts and looks cool, or is galvanized.
Would you be opposed to having an ornamental windmill without the power generation component?
Yeah, if you want to strike that, I don't see us doing that.
My only concern is just residential windmills generally, once we crack open that
Yeah.
lid, I think.
Yeah,
You have a lot of people that want them, the noise that they cause.
did I?
Yeah, they cause quite a bit of noise from the blades going through the air, the wildlife. I had a claim once where they built a big wind farm on the west coast, and they didn't realize that it was about 1/8 of a mile from a peregrine falcon reserve. And this thing was like Barry Bonds with a straightaway fastball. It was tossing these, people were finding peregrine falcons like 500 yards dead in their yard and stuff. So they're just, it's a whole different
Yeah.
animal, so to speak, if we open up the door on a
Yeah,
residential
that's
energy generating windmill. Like, and you don't have any plans for like where your charge controller would be located, or?
Yeah, there's been, like I said, no thought put into that, very little. I think if anything, would probably go to solar, probably before wind would probably be more effective, just with given the trees, you know, all the trees are down because we had to raise the property.
But you'd be okay if you had like an ornamental windmill that was consistent with the family farm look and
Yes,
that
please.
aesthetic,
Yeah.
that wasn't hooked up to
Yeah,
the grid?
yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
don't see, yep.
okay, that's all I have.
Any other questions, Brian?
Mine isn't necessarily a question, but it's more of a comment. On your aviary,
Yeah.
the Blackland Prairie Raptor Center takes injured and distressed birds.
Where are they located?
They're in Lucas, right on Lake Levon at Brockdale.
Okay.
And then one question, so in terms of we talked about in pre-session, if the property is sold and replatted, and those are replatted to separate lots, just make sure that you understand that it essentially those would have to be raised from the property.
Yep.
And to comply.
Yeah, in my parents' house, that's not the actual footprint, it's different, actually I've designed it since, but it's made to where it can be added onto in a good way to where it does not look like an addition, and it would be a great house. Just, it would be 1,000 or something bigger, a 2-story, and also another wing put on there. And not have to, remove what was paid for and what we built.
Sounds good, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Go ahead, you got a question?
Yes. On the bald eagle disturbance permit that you're getting, will that be for building during breeding season?
Here's what I believe the permit will say, it's not, final yet. So I think that they, and according to the two women that run in Albuquerque, I think they will let us do kind of whatever we want, without a taking, obviously, our goal is to keep the birds alive and keep them flourishing. But if we're working like during work hours from 9 to 6 and they want to come back, I think they're very adaptable right now. And according to Fish and Wildlife, the gentleman who runs it came up, he was like, these guys keep coming closer to town, and the whole concept is they're not endangered anymore, of course, and so now they're coming closer to town, almost like not a pest, but other issues are arising, and so I think his words were they're very adaptable, and I think that's what we're seeing right now, because we have big bulldozers and machinery, and they don't seem to bother them at all. What's so cool about it is if you go just to the east towards Coppell, there's those 2 big ponds that were built when River Chase was built 20 years ago or 30 years ago. And so they'll fly that way and they'll come back with a fishing rod. So they have great feeding, and those are 2 big ponds that are, I've never seen them. My son saw one, and the guys working out there saw them, like 10-inch, like whatever 10-inch fish is, I don't know, perch or something. But so I think in what Fish and Wildlife has said is if they have good habitat for eating and stuff, then that's what keeps them here, like all of us. So I'm hoping they stay around.
So it sounds like, I haven't been out there. There's already earth moving going on in that area. Okay, so
Yeah,
there's
I'm sure
already
you could-
noise and trucks.
Yeah, so we had raised, all the property had to be raised basically 5 feet, in that part. So we dug a huge pond, 2 of them, and one for phase 1, one for phase 2, basically. So there's a huge pond that's, probably, but then right around it, we did not build or develop right around it, and so we just started like a week ago, bringing coming back in, because they had to leave the nest and then get, scheduled, excavator scheduled, and then bring equipment. So they just started last week, so now we're raising up and building that cul-de-sac that's right next to it. So whether they come back, I'm betting that they will, because it's going to cost probably, like the retaining wall and everything, it's going to be kind of expensive to keep them there and hope that the trees don't die and that they come back. So it's kind of a bit of a gamble. So I think it's one we're willing to take and hope. But my guess is that when I saw them, I was so close to saying take it down because of just the cost. And then I saw those 2 guys yesterday afternoon, and I thought, oh, here they are trying to sell them. So I can't, since seeing them yesterday, I can't probably take this down.
Right, thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is a public hearing. Does any member of the public wish to address the commission or Mr. Means on this case? Hearing none, I close the public hearing. Thoughts, commissioners, or do I hear a motion?
I still, on that condition 5F, we can go back to that. There it is, right, the last one. I realize why it's worded that way. I still think it's confusing, so I would rather have it say any enclosure, pen, corral, or any other restrictive area for livestock may be located within 10 feet of any property used for residential purposes on lot 5R, block D. I think that would minimize confusion.
Say that again, Sarah.
Or I could say, so where it
Any
says
property.
10 feet,
Yeah.
you would read the whole thing?
No, just 10 feet of any
Okay,
property.
after 10 feet, 10 feet of, and then strike any residentially zoned property or. So it'll say within 10 feet of any property used for residential purposes on lot 5R, block D.
Got it.
Okay.
And I would, on the windmill, I'd like to go ahead and,
So that it's only,
yeah, because right now it's written as a functioning windmill with energy system for a single-family residence. And how could we word that?
One decorative windmill.
Decorative windmill?
Yeah. I like that.
Probably gets in there.
Yeah, I would assume we want a height restriction on it as well.
well, that's, with the 25 feet is the,
That's the,
Yeah.
okay, that'd be the height restriction.
yeah,
Okay.
unless you wanted something different.
Yeah, my general comments in terms of like the 3,000, 2,700, I don't have an issue with the early start. You mentioned that it sounds like Mr. Holmes learned a lot about bald eagles and covering that. As long as all the proper authorities are comfortable with kind of what's happening, that's fine. As I mentioned in pre-session on the ordinance on the pool cabanas, as long as we're looking at that for the future ordinance, so if other folks come in, that we're open to it, because that's one of the areas where concerns me of either pre-post, folks that just came in 2 weeks ago, or folks that are coming in 2 weeks later, that they should have the same ability or the same consideration to put, if it essentially meets this, all the surrounding criteria, setbacks and so forth. And then we talked about the windmill. Yeah, and then in terms of the horse and cattle, I think as long as, and this may be maybe a technical thing, but as long as it has to, based on this condition, it has to meet all the requirements for livestock or cattle, like the number and so forth, because the way it's written, you could construe that they're approved for any horse, so it would supersede the number in the ordinance.
So we can say, but must meet all other livestock requirements.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we want it specifically put in as a miniature llama?
That would be great if you posted that on his
Is that-
website, so my daughter can see it. She
Yeah.
can bet.
Is that it's not considered livestock?
Yeah.
I think it's considered other,
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I got you. Good,
because it's not
I
a
think
family
that would
pet.
be any other livestock.
okay.
Yeah. That's what I think, but I'm not an expert in that. And then Commissioner Walker, agree with the wind energy and the height on that as well. Is there any concern on the two responses were generally negative? Any concern on those?
I think the one was, they didn't like the accessory dwelling unit.
Because of the commune thing,
The what?
commune.
Oh, I didn't get
That's the way,
copies.
that's the way communes begin.
So, in terms of,
Okay.
they were talking about the accessory dwelling unit and how it can be rented out as, VRBO
Okay.
or short-term rental. Could it potentially? I don't think that's his intent. His intent is for family to live there.
And the PD would not amend any city short-term rental ordinance anyway.
Right.
Right, so even if he sold it outright, even if I bought it from him in 5 years, I would still be prohibited from operating a SDR then.
No, that's not true, because you can have an STR.
You just have to get a permit for it, right?
Well, okay, fair, without getting a permit, I would be prohibited.
Right. Now, here's what I will propose, is that you can put in your HOA documents, because the HOA documents are actually probably stronger than what we could do, is that no one could do a short-term rental in the Blackberry's community, Blackberry Farm community. Are you willing to do that?
But wouldn't that, if it was ever sold, I would propose that it would say, for it to get a CO, it would have to be upgraded to the size of the home.
Right,
Now
we're
it's-
not talking about that though, we're talking about.
Yeah, no.
But it would become that, wouldn't it?
They're talking about an STR, like a short-term rental. It's like you renting it out on Airbnb or
Or
VRBO.
if I hadn't sold it.
Or even if you did sell
Yeah,
it,
you
do
could,
you know what I mean?
The new buyer coming in, yeah.
well, if I,
Even
Yeah.
now.
but I would like the protection of, if it was ever, I was thinking that if it was ever sold, no one can ever live there because the city would give it a CO, or it would have a CO but not a, it would have to be increased in size to the size
In
of,
order to separate it from your lot, because right now it's part of lot.
right, but to sell it,
It's
you'd have
part
to
of lot.
separate a lot, I would think you'd have to
Right,
do that.
in order to separate it, you have to upgrade it, which the timing on that is kind of,
Yeah, right, chicken and egg.
chicken and egg.
Yeah. But that's why I think you can sell it, you cannot receive a CO of living until it is increased in size.
What they're asking for though is about the STR component of it.
Short-term rentals.
Short-term
Yeah,
rental. Are you willing to add something to your HOA documents, because you have to amend them anyway, to say you can't have an STR?
No short-term rentals in the community, not just this lot, the community.
All
I
of
think
Blackberry
they already say
Farms.
that, but we could, I think so, yeah, I don't. But that's a city ordinance anyway.
That's not a city ordinance. Right now, you would be allowed an STR with a permit.
Well, what does that stand for?
STR is short-term rental, which means that you can rent it out on a VRBO site.
Airbnb,
Okay.
people rent, yeah.
So I doubt you want people blowing it out there for the cowboy game on your family lot.
So
Probably not really desirable.
So your deed restrictions or restrictive covenants can be more restrictive than the city ordinance.
Gotcha.
And so for your protection of your community, we've seen some developers go in and say, yeah, they limit the number of long-term rentals and then they strictly prohibit short-term rentals. So that's an idea for you.
Yeah, that was the sort, really kind of the gravamen of this one Marla Williams complaint, was that she was concerned that the ADU would end up being rented on short-term sites like VRBO.
Yeah.
And when we handled that other property on the forest, didn't we
We put a
address that
condition.
somehow? Yeah,
Mhm.
to prevent that?
I can't remember if we put a condition, but really, the stronger hammer is for it to be in the HOA documents.
Sure. Yeah, no question.
Yeah, I mean, the issue I have with that is that it feels a little odd to impose that on the development, because, and I understand as the developer you could, but I mean, similar to the rest of Coppell, like why would those houses not be able to do some short-term rentals similar to other neighborhoods. It should be generally consistent. My concern is more with let's say the barn. So let's say if that's replatted and sold, but not as a residence, just as a barn.
Well, you can't, because it's.
Okay, so it couldn't be.
Right.
Okay, so the only way that it could be, let's say a short term, let's say it becomes a party barn with horses, and so it's rented out to have, parties with llamas. And so you could.
But it's a residence, it's not a commercial property.
Right, but you could now.
That's
So-
the new thing, instead of Airbnb, you can rent out your pools, so you could probably
Right.
rent out a party barn.
So I'm not saying that's necessarily what his intention is, I'm saying that could, so they sold the whole property in 2 years to someone else, and they say, oh, I want to rent this out, I can rent this out, I don't want the livestock, but I can rent it out as a, a wedding chapel or what have you.
Yeah, but you don't need, it's not a commercial function, you don't have the parking, you don't have all the other stuff.
Okay, well, that's what I'm asking,
You know,
as long
and
as.
that's what
it's
we're trying
Yeah.
to prevent. And
Yeah.
so one of those, the tool to do that is to be in the HOA documents, because that is a very strong document.
Sure.
To, basically you can start putting liens on the house and all this other kind of stuff.
Sure.
So could that be made as a condition?
But it sounds like though, it's not really possible. I mean, the condition would, if you put the condition in, it would prevent anyone in the community from doing a short-term rental. And it's not really the intent, I think we're
Well,
going for.
there are neighborhoods that is the intent, they don't want people.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
in higher end
And
neighborhoods.
It might even be a good selling point that there's a deed restriction or an HOA
That's a fair
restriction
point.
that
Yeah, that's a fair point.
prohibits the cowboy game folks on the weekends.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I just hate to sort of burden specific subdivisions, with it.
I don't think it's a burden, I think like Jim said, it's actually a selling point.
Yeah, and you may be right. I mean, I wasn't thinking of that.
And you may see some HOAs like, if they don't feel like the city's STR ordinance is strong enough, they may just go ahead and amend their
Yeah,
HOA bylaws or whatever to prohibit it, and then no one in the neighborhood can do it. And they have a lot more enforcement powers than the city does.
Well, Terry's in a unique position, he can do that before he sells any land.
Sure.
Once he starts selling houses, then
trickier.
the
Yeah.
residents are free to use their lots, except as they're restricted by the HOA document.
And you can't amend the HOA document.
You can amend it, but you need 3/4 to do it.
Right, right.
Not as long as it's under declarant control, though.
Yeah.
That's
He
right,
can
that's what
change it up.
Terry can control
Yeah,
it
he can
now.
control it up to 80%.
that's true.
Right.
So it's a question whether you want to control it or not. And maybe you and your lawyer need to talk about the HOA documents first.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the short term, in the next several years, it doesn't seem like there'll be a problem with these folks living there, so.
Yeah, but the time to address it would be now though, because this is the easiest time to address it. Once you start,
Yeah,
like I said, selling off all the lots, and then once you get to a certain point, then it turns over to the homeowners.
yeah.
I think it's just a good selling point, frankly, myself.
Yeah. Well, I'm less concerned about, because the topic is just this piece, and so imposing on the rest of the lots is, I mean, it could be a benefit, it could not be, and either way, but I think the focus should be on whether or not, it's,
From
our-
a staff perspective, I would like to see it for the whole neighborhood,
yeah,
just based on experience of what we've seen happen.
And just to clarify, so we are not only looking at this block, but we're looking at the entire.
Right, so the issue that came up was the one resident who was concerned specifically with this lot, with the accessory dwelling unit. But the fact of STRs, it's not just, obviously the accessory dwelling unit is easy pickings, right?
Mhm.
Because it's separate and what have you. But you know, you could rent out any house with the SDR.
You could rent out a room in that house.
But I mean, in this case, like any of the accessory structures, you really can't do a short-term rental because they're not livable spaces and they can't be converted to livable spaces.
Yeah, they're not residences
They're not
at all.
residences. And then two, as you mentioned before, that they can't be a commercial
Right.
short-term rental because it's not a commercial piece of property. So, like, I think in terms of this, it's not, I don't think it would come into play. It doesn't sound like it'd be able to. So it's less of a concern in terms of imposing that, but, I mean, I see the point that if it's, you know, it could certainly benefit the property, but I don't know, it feels odd to me that sort of even though we'd probably want it to impose it unless Mr. Holmes would, you know, agree to, that he would want to do that. Unless I'm misconstruing it.
Yeah, so, you know, originally the accessory dwelling unit was a concern of the neighbor. But like I said, it's something that actually impacts all the houses in that neighborhood, the short-term rental ordinance. So, I don't know, Terry, have you thought about that? Would you consider?
I prefer not to put on any more restrictions. I haven't like thought about it honestly, you know, to think, yeah, does someone rent or not? I don't even know the city's rules, obviously, you know, and how that relates. I don't know.
Well, you could even put, you know, specifically to your lot that it can't be used as an.
We could stay on that lot. I mean, I don't have a problem with that, but, yeah. I think there, yeah, I don't foresee that being an issue on our lot, but, I don't know what someone would want to do. I don't even know that whole thought process. I've never considered it. I have no idea what people are doing with those things. If they're renting a room, I guess, is there anything wrong with that? And are they renting it to their, you know, a family member, but they're charging? I don't know where the lines in the sand are. I don't understand that.
Well, this is like if somebody wanted to rent a hotel room, instead of renting the hotel room for the night, they would rent the house for the night.
Right.
That's
Okay.
the short-term rental. Yeah.
Yeah, but where does it get diluted down to it's even,
It's defined in the ordinance, it's
Okay.
long-term rental versus
Yeah.
shorterm
okay,
rental.
I don't know, yeah, I don't have any knowledge of that. I would prefer not to have any more restrictions on the south rest of the city, though.
So what about for your particular lot to accommodate that concern?
I mean, it doesn't bother me, but I don't know who the person is, or I guess they live on Hollywood, but is it really a concern, or is it just something that's thrown out there? You know, I think it's just like the most appropriate one would be, because we built a home up there on St. Andrews, where they added that. It sounds like we built a original home, we're not doing anything with the addition, but if that restriction was not put on that one, I don't know why it would be put on ours.
Yeah, I think yours just kind of looks different because it's, the typical accessory dwelling unit is behind the house.
Yeah,
Yours is a different situation, I don't know, in my perspective.
yeah,
Because it looks like a house
could be, yeah.
on, just another house on the street.
I don't have a problem with it either way.
Well, if they were gonna do it as short-term rental, they still have to come in and get a permit, right? Doesn't,
Yeah, it would.
you could deny it then.
Well, I
It's
do
words like that.
I do have one other thing, I guess, in regards to the overall PD. You know, I think we talked about this in the pre-session about cabanas and the restroom, but including language about having a swimming pool, part of that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So you want to have a pool required with the cabana?
That was our discussion in the,
Mhm.
Okay.
yeah.
The cabana can't be installed if you don't have a pool.
Yeah, it's gonna be a pool cabana, you gotta have a pool.
Gotta have a pool.
What about a hot tub? Does that count or no?
No.
I wouldn't think so.
Is there a definition between a hot tub and a pool?
Right, it is a small body of water.
Yeah,
Can't
but what's
speak very
that
well
difference? So if
hot
the hot tub's this big or the hot tub's, if the
Right.
hot tub's really big?
In my pool in summer, it's like a hot tub sometimes.
So you couldn't have a cabana?
Londa can answer that question.
I was just asking Karen if I can.
No,
So a hot tub is considered a spa versus a pool. So when we get pool permits, they'll say on there that there's a pool, one pool in the spa, or one pool in 0 spas. So we look at the permit accordingly and plans and
Okay.
all the other requirements that come.
Okay, that's helpful.
And I would say to clarify, that's good, to say permanent pool. Because let's say, I'm sorry, but you know, going way out there, one of those little pools, those little kid pools that you get at Walmart, you
They're
know,
$6,
that's a pool.
yeah.
That's a pool, so it's a permitted, but that's not a permanent pool, so permitted pool,
Permanent or permitted?
permitted.
Permitted.
Pool with a permit.
Follow me?
Okay.
I hope
Given
so.
where we
All right.
are,
I'm hoping somebody was taking notes, I didn't.
I'm gonna move the commission to approve PD-259-SF-7/SF-9 Blackberry Farm, a zoning request change from PD-259-SF-7/SF-9, plan development 259-single-family-7/single-family-9, post brand to PDR 25-9R-SF-7/SF-9. Plan development 259 revised, single-family-7 single-family-9. As proposed, subject to the staff conditions with the changes we have now discussed, including the pool cabana shall be allowed to have a restroom. And the
And they must have a permitted swimming pool.
must have a permitted swimming pool. The
Windmill's decorative.
windmill will be decorative. Which one is that one?
5B.
V, okay.
5B.
5B, V. Okay.
There'll be
What
no
about
energy
5F?
system or single family.
And the 5F will read, any enclosure, pen, corral, or other restrictive area for livestock may be located
Within 10 feet.
within 10 feet
Of any
of
property.
any property used for residential purposes on lot 5R-block D.
And,
The livestock.
the
should be-
livestock
Should be subject to the
must meet
other,
all other livestock requirements.
yes.
I
And
don't think we need to touch that because that's city ordinance.
I mean, there are any number of other ordinances that would do anyways, right?
yeah.
Yeah. So,
And we're talking about how, if it's split, that it must meet all the requirements.
he can't sell it at all or split it, except as this proposal is enacted.
Yeah.
If he varies slightly from it and sells it, he's got a code violation that's gonna get asserted against he or the purchaser.
Yeah, you can't sell in platted lots.
Yeah, you're gonna have to replat. And I think he knows that. But he has the right to have his family live there the way he wants to. And that's what we're approving, I think.
That was second.
Kevin,
Oh, sorry.
call the roll.
Vice Chairman Portman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guerra,
Aye.
Commissioner Bishop,
Aye.
Commissioner Blankenship,
Aye.
Commissioner Mauer,
Aye.
Commissioner Walker. All approved, none opposed, motion carries.
We will now close the hearings and adjourn.
Wait,
You wanna,
There's the second one we withdrew.
But we have to talk about that because.
Talk about withdrawing it.
We withdraw it right now.
Yep.
Oh, we have to withdraw it.
And item number 7.
Item number 7 is withdrawn.
Mr. Holmes, you are withdrawing item 7, which is the plat, until next meeting?
Yes.
Okay, it's withdrawn. Now we are adjourned.
All right, well done. Is that okay?
We don't have to vote on that?
7 is
Right.
next.
Yeah, he sent me a picture of the car, 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 of the car.